My girlfriend broke into my room, crying and asked, "What did you do to my pills?" What? I quit my Clash Royale game and stood up confused. She immediately started tearing through my stuff. First my desk drawers where she threw my notebooks and pens everywhere. Then she moved to my dresser and started pulling out clothes and tossing them on the floor. Her hands were shaking as she searched through everything like her life depended on it. I watched her dump out my backpack next, all my textbooks and laptop chargers scattered across the floor. She even checked inside my shoes, which made no sense at all. My roommate Mike walked in from the hallway and stopped dead when he saw Cheyenne destroying our room. "Dude, what's happening?" Mike looked between us nervously. Cheyenne spun around to face him with wild eyes. She asked if he'd seen me take anything from her room. Mike shook his head and quickly backed out, saying he'd give us space. Smart guy knew when to make himself scarce. "Cheyenne, what pills are you talking about?" I tried to grab her shoulders gently. She pushed me away and went for my closet next. Started pulling boxes off the top shelf and checking inside each one. Even opened my old shoeboxes full of baseball cards from when I was a kid. Whatever she was looking for had her completely desperate. That's when she pulled out her phone and showed me a text from her roommate, Carla. It said Carla had seen someone who looked like me in their room earlier that day. There was even a blurry photo attached showing a guy in a black hoodie going through Cheyenne's nightstand drawer. The person in the photo did look like me from behind. Same height and build, same black North Face hoodie I always wore. But I'd been in the library all afternoon working on my economics paper. I even had the timestamps on my laptop to prove it. "That's not me. I swear I haven't been in your room today." I showed her my laptop history. Cheyenne wasn't listening, though. She collapsed on my bed and put her face in her hands. Started talking about how she needed those pills and couldn't function without them. How everything would fall apart if she didn't have them by tomorrow. Her breathing was getting faster and more panicked. I sat next to her trying to understand. In all our months together, I'd never seen her take any medication. Never noticed pill bottles in her room. Never heard her mention any health issues. But now she was acting like these mysterious pills were life or death. "We can go to the health center. Get you whatever prescription you need." I rubbed her back gently. She shook her head frantically, said it was too complicated to explain, that normal doctors wouldn't understand, that she'd tried the traditional route before but it didn't work. Nothing about this was making sense, but Cheyenne was getting more agitated by the minute. Then she mentioned something that made my stomach drop. Her ex-boyfriend Jeremiah had texted her last week asking about her new relationship, making comments about how I better treat her right. She'd ignored it, but now she wondered if he was involved somehow. I pulled up Jeremiah's Instagram and felt a chill run down my spine. His most recent photos showed he'd dyed his hair dark brown just like mine, was wearing similar clothes in every picture. There was even a photo of him standing outside our dorm building with the caption, "Visiting old friends." Cheyenne called Jeremiah, but he didn't answer. She texted asking if he knew anything about her missing pills. Within seconds, he replied with just 3 words that confirmed our worst fears. "Check your email." Cheyenne's hands trembled as she opened her laptop. There was a new message with no subject line, just a photo attachment showing a small, unmarked pill bottle sitting on what was clearly Jeremiah's desk. Next to it was a printed photo of me and Cheyenne from her Instagram. The message below was simple. He wanted to meet with Cheyenne tonight. Alone, at his off-campus apartment. If she brought anyone or called the police, he'd flush the pills. But if she came by herself, he'd return them and never bother her again. He just needed closure. You can't seriously be considering this. I stood up pacing, but Cheyenne was already grabbing her jacket. She explained she had no choice. That without those pills, she'd end up in the hospital by tomorrow night. That her parents would find out things she'd kept hidden. That her scholarship would be at risk. Everything in her life would unravel. I tried to stop her, but she was determined. Promised she'd be careful. Said Jeremiah was manipulative, but not dangerous. That he was just a lonely guy who couldn't let go. She kissed me quickly and left before I could convince her otherwise. That was 3 hours ago. Now I was sitting in my destroyed room staring at my phone. Cheyenne wasn't answering calls or texts. Her location sharing was turned off. Carla hadn't seen her come back. I'd driven by Jeremiah's apartment twice but couldn't see anything through the windows. Finally, my phone buzzed. A text from Cheyenne's number, but it didn't sound like her. Too formal and cold. Said she was fine and had decided to give Jeremiah another chance. Told me not to contact either of them again. My hands started shaking as I read it over and over. Then another text came through. "Cheyenne doesn't take pills, she's trying to trap you." I grabbed my phone and started taking screenshots of both messages. My fingers kept slipping on the screen because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I saved each screenshot with the timestamp showing at the top. The first text said Cheyenne wanted to give Jeremiah another chance. The second one warned me she was trying to trap me. Neither one made any sense, but I needed proof of both. Mike pushed open our door and stopped when he saw me sitting in the middle of all the mess Cheyenne had made. He asked what happened, and I just held up my phone to show him the texts. He read them twice, then looked around at the scattered notebooks and clothes everywhere. I started explaining from the beginning while we picked stuff up off the floor. Told him about the blurry photo of someone who looked like me in Cheyenne's room, About Jeremiah stealing her pills and demanding she meet him alone. About her leaving 3 hours ago and not answering any calls. Mike listened while shoving my textbooks back into my backpack. He said we needed to call someone, but I shouldn't go to Jeremiah's apartment by myself. The guy was clearly unstable and trying to mess with both of us. We spent the next 20 minutes getting the room back to normal. Mike grabbed armfuls of clothes and dumped them on my bed while I reorganized my desk drawers. I kept checking my phone every few seconds, hoping Cheyenne would text something that actually sounded like her. Nothing came through. Mike said the whole pill situation was weird because he'd never seen Cheyenne take any medication either. Never noticed her acting sick or mentioning doctor appointments. Whatever these pills were, she'd kept them completely hidden from everyone. We finished cleaning and sat on our beds staring at each other. Mike suggested calling Carla since she was Cheyenne's roommate and might know more about the medication thing. I pulled up her number and hit call. She answered on the third ring, sounding half asleep. I explained that Cheyenne went to meet Jeremiah alone at his apartment and wasn't responding to anyone. Carla's voice went from sleepy to worried in about 2 seconds. She asked if I'd tried campus security, and I said not yet. Carla started talking fast about how Cheyenne had been acting strange lately. Said she'd catch Cheyenne taking pills from an unmarked bottle, but Cheyenne would never explain what they were for. Just said it was complicated and changed the subject. Carla also mentioned that Jeremiah used to show up at their dorm all the time last semester. He'd wait outside their building or follow Cheyenne to class. It got bad enough that Cheyenne filed a no-contact request through their RA, but Jeremiah kept finding ways around it. This whole pattern of controlling behavior suddenly made way more sense. Jeremiah wasn't just some lonely ex who couldn't let go. He was actively stalking Cheyenne and using these pills as leverage. I thanked Carla and told her I'd keep her updated. Then I grabbed my car keys and headed out. Mike called after me asking where I was going, but I was already down the hallway. I drove across campus to the street where Jeremiah's apartment building sat, found a parking spot with a clear view of his unit on the second floor. Lights were on behind the curtains, but I couldn't see anyone moving around inside. I sat there for maybe 15 minutes just watching those windows. My phone stayed silent. No text from Cheyenne. No calls. Nothing. I kept thinking about that second warning text. Someone had used her phone to tell me she was trying to trap me, but who sent it and why? Was it actually Cheyenne trying to warn me? Or was it Jeremiah messing with my head? Sitting in my car feeling completely helpless, I debated whether calling the police would help or make things worse. What if Cheyenne really was there voluntarily and I got her in trouble? What if those pills were something illegal and the cops showing up caused more problems? But what if she was in danger and needed help right now? My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. He said we should call campus security instead of the actual police. They could do a wellness check, which was less aggressive, but still got someone official involved. That actually made sense. I started my car and drove back toward campus. Mike was waiting in our room with his laptop open when I got back. He'd already pulled up the campus security website looking for their non-emergency number. I sat next to him and we found the contact page together. But before calling them, Mike suggested we contact our RA first, since he'd know the proper procedure. Mike opened our dorm group chat and scrolled until he found Lucas's name. He sent a message explaining we needed help with an emergency situation involving another student's safety. While we waited for Lucas to respond, I opened my laptop and pulled up my library account, went through my login history from this afternoon. The timestamp showed I'd signed into a library computer at 2:15 and stayed logged in until 6:10. That was 4 solid hours of proof that I wasn't anywhere near Cheyenne's room when someone stole her pills. I took screenshots of the login records and added them to a new folder on my desktop. Mike looked over my shoulder and nodded. He said that evidence would clear me completely if anyone tried to say I was the one in that blurry photo. Lucas responded to Mike's message within 10 minutes. Said he was coming down to our room right now. He showed up still wearing his pajama pants and a hoodie. We let him in, and he sat in Mike's desk chair while I explained everything from the beginning. Lucas pulled out his phone and started taking notes. He asked specific questions about when Cheyenne left and what the text said. When I mentioned Jeremiah demanding she come alone, Lucas's expression got serious. He said this sounded like it could involve coercion and maybe even identity fraud if Jeremiah really did impersonate me. Lucas explained that campus security could do a wellness check if we were worried about a student's safety, but he also said I needed to compile all my evidence into one place: the photos, the texts, the timestamps, Jeremiah's Instagram posts showing his new appearance, everything that proved what was actually happening. He said documentation was crucial for any official report, because without proof it just became he said, she said. I spent the next hour organizing everything into a single folder, while Mike made a backup copy on his external hard drive. We included screenshots of Jeremiah's recent Instagram posts where he dyed his hair dark brown like mine, added the blurry photo Carla had sent showing someone in a black hoodie going through Cheyenne's room, put in all the threatening texts and emails Jeremiah had sent, added my library login timestamps proving my location. By the time we finished, the folder had over 30 files documenting the entire situation. Lucas reviewed everything and said this was exactly what campus security and police would need to see. Lucas pulled out his phone and dialed campus security right there in our room. He put it on speaker, so we could all hear. A woman answered, and Lucas explained the situation in a calm voice. He said a student had gone to meet her ex-boyfriend under bad circumstances and wasn't answering calls. The woman asked for Cheyenne's name and dorm building. Lucas gave her all the information while I sat on my bed gripping my phone. The security officer said they would send someone to check on the situation, but couldn't force entry without proof of immediate danger. She took down Jeremiah's address and said she'd call back with an update. Lucas thanked her and hung up. The call took maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like forever. I grabbed Mike's phone from his desk and tried calling Cheyenne again. Maybe she was just blocking my number. Mike unlocked it for me and I dialed her contact. The phone rang once, then went straight to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded message played, and I felt sick hearing her normal voice. I hung up without leaving a message. Mike asked what happened, and I told him her phone was either off or dead. That wasn't like Cheyenne at all. She always kept her phone charged and never turned it off. Even when she slept, she kept it on the nightstand with the ringer on. My hands started shaking worse as I stared at Mike's phone screen. Then my own phone buzzed with a text from Carla. She said she'd been going through old messages and found something important. I opened the screenshots she sent. They showed a conversation between Cheyenne and Jeremiah from 3 months ago. He was talking about helping her with performance anxiety. Said he could get her pills that normal doctors wouldn't give out. Pills that would help her stay calm during presentations and tests. Cheyenne had thanked him multiple times in the messages. Called him a lifesaver. Said she didn't know what she'd do without his help. I felt my stomach turn reading it. These weren't legitimate prescription pills. Jeremiah had been supplying her with something to create dependence, to keep control over her even after they broke up. Carla sent another text saying this proved Jeremiah was manipulating Cheyenne all along. Lucas read over my shoulder and his face got serious. He said this changed everything because it showed a pattern of control and coercion. My phone rang and I jumped, campus security calling back. I answered, and the same woman from before spoke. She said they'd sent an officer to Jeremiah's apartment and knocked several times, but no one answered. They couldn't hear anything inside and had no legal reason to force entry. I asked if they could try again or wait outside. She said they'd already spent 20 minutes there and couldn't do more without evidence of immediate danger. Lucas took my phone and thanked her for trying. After she hung up, he said we needed to file a formal report with campus police in the morning. That would create an official record and give them more authority to investigate. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Lucas suggested writing down everything that happened tonight with exact times. I typed out the whole timeline, starting with Cheyenne tearing through my room at 9. Added the accusation about me stealing her pills. Included the blurry photo from Carla showing someone in my hoodie. Wrote about Jeremiah's email demanding she come alone. Put in the time Cheyenne left around 10. Added the 2 conflicting texts that came through at midnight. One saying she was getting back with Jeremiah, the other warning me it was a trap. Seeing it all written out like that made the manipulation obvious. Jeremiah had planned every step. Stolen the pills while dressed like me. Used them as leverage to get Cheyenne alone. Sent contradictory messages to confuse everyone. Lucas read through my timeline and said it was perfect documentation. Mike suggested we go watch Jeremiah's apartment in case something happened. I grabbed my car keys and we headed out. Lucas said he'd stay in the dorm in case security called back. Mike and I drove to Jeremiah's building and parked across the street where we could see his unit. The lights were still on behind the curtains. We sat there watching for any movement or shadows. Mike took the first hour while I tried to stay calm. My leg kept bouncing and I couldn't stop checking my phone. No new messages from Cheyenne. No calls. Nothing. Around 2 we switched and Mike watched while I stared at the building. A few cars drove past, but nobody came or went from the apartment. The lights stayed on the whole time. At 3 we gave up. Both of us were exhausted but too wired to actually sleep. We drove back to campus and trudged up to our room. I couldn't just sit there doing nothing, so I opened my laptop again. Started searching for information about revenge tactics and impersonation fraud. Found articles about identity theft and criminal trespassing. Read that deliberately dressing like someone else to commit a crime made it worse. The impersonation showed planning and intent. What Jeremiah did by stealing Cheyenne's pills while pretending to be me could be serious criminal charges. Trespassing and theft at minimum. Maybe even stalking or harassment depending on his history. I took screenshots of the legal definitions and saved them with my other evidence. The sun started coming up around 6. I hadn't slept at all. Mike was passed out on his bed, still wearing his shoes. I pulled up my email and found my economics professor's address. Wrote him a message explaining I had a personal emergency last night. Asked if I could get an extension on the paper due today. Attached a note from Lucas confirming there was a dorm incident that required my attention. Sent it and hoped he'd understand. My door opened at 8, and Lucas walked in carrying 2 coffees. He handed me one and I took it grateful for the caffeine. He had a stack of printed papers with campus resource information, counseling services, victim advocacy, the formal complaint process. He sat down and said he was taking this to his supervisor because it was beyond normal roommate drama. This involved criminal behavior and student safety. He asked if I was okay and I just shrugged. Didn't really know how to answer that. Lucas said we had a meeting with the housing director at 9. He'd already set it up and explained the basics. She wanted to review all my evidence personally. We walked over to the main housing office right at 9. The director was a woman in her 50s who looked serious but kind. She introduced herself and asked me to sit down. Lucas stayed with me for support. I pulled out my laptop and showed her everything. The timeline, the screenshots, Jeremiah's Instagram posts, my library login records, the texts from Carla. She read through it all carefully, taking notes. When she finished, she looked up and said this needed to involve campus police immediately. Identity fraud and coercion were serious issues that went beyond housing policy. She picked up her phone to make the call. She dialed campus police and put it on speaker while she explained the situation to the dispatcher. Gave them my name and student ID number. Said she needed an officer to take a formal report about identity fraud and possible trespassing. The dispatcher asked a few questions about the incident and checked something in their system. Then she scheduled me for 11 a.m. at the campus police station. The housing director thanked her and hung up. She turned to me and said if Jeremiah had been entering dorms by pretending to be a student, they could ban him from all campus property. Not just a warning, but an actual legal ban that would get him arrested if he showed up. Lucas wrote down the appointment time in his phone and said he'd walk me over there. The housing director handed me a printed copy of the housing policy about unauthorized entry, said I should bring all my evidence to the police appointment. I thanked her and left with Lucas. We walked back toward my dorm in silence. My brain felt overloaded with everything that had happened in the past few hours. When we got to my floor, Lucas said to get some rest and he'd check on me in the morning. I went into my room and Mike was asleep on his bed. I pulled out my phone to set an alarm for 10 a.m. That's when I saw a notification from Instagram. Jeremiah had posted to his story. I opened it and felt my skin crawl. Just 3 words in white text on a black background. Finally talking. Below that was a photo of his apartment door taken from inside. The timestamp showed 2 a.m., which meant Cheyenne had still been there in the middle of the night. Hours after she'd texted me to leave her alone, I took a screenshot and added it to my evidence folder. Tried calling Cheyenne again, but her phone was still off. I couldn't sleep, so I just laid there staring at the ceiling, kept checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for some message from her. Around 7 a.m., I gave up and took a shower, got dressed and made coffee in our room's small pot. Mike woke up and asked if I'd heard anything. I shook my head and showed him Jeremiah's Instagram story. He looked at it and said that was really creepy. My phone buzzed with a text from Carla. She said she needed to send me something important. A minute later, a voice memo file came through. I hit play and heard Cheyenne's voice. She sounded stressed and scared. The recording was from 2 days ago, according to the timestamp. Cheyenne was talking to Carla about Jeremiah, said he'd been texting her all week, making comments about her new relationship, asking if I knew about certain things from her past. Then Cheyenne's voice got quieter. She said Jeremiah threatened to tell everyone something if she didn't meet with him. Tell her parents, tell the university, tell me. She didn't say what the secret was, but she sounded genuinely afraid. The recording ended and I just sat there processing it. This wasn't just about pills. Jeremiah had been blackmailing her with something else entirely. I forwarded the voice memo to my evidence folder and texted Carla back thanking her. She replied saying Cheyenne had sworn her to secrecy, but now that she was missing, Carla felt like she had to share it. I spent the next hour going through everything one more time, making sure all my screenshots were organized, all my timestamps were clear, all the evidence was ready to show the police. Lucas knocked on my door at 10:30, and we walked over to the campus police station together. It was in a small building near the administration offices. We went inside, and I gave my name to the front desk officer. She told me to have a seat and that Officer Wheeler would be with me shortly. The waiting area had plastic chairs and old magazines. Lucas sat with me and we didn't talk much, just waited. After about 15 minutes, a tall officer in his 30s came out and introduced himself as Officer Damon Wheeler. He shook my hand and led me back to a small interview room. Lucas asked if he could sit in and Wheeler said that was fine. We all sat down at a metal table. Wheeler pulled out a notepad and asked me to start from the beginning. I opened my laptop and walked him through everything, showed him the timeline I'd made, the photo of someone in my hoodie going through Cheyenne's room, my library login records proving I wasn't there, Jeremiah's Instagram posts showing he'd changed his appearance to look like me, the threatening email, the text from Cheyenne's phone, the voice memo from Carla. Wheeler took notes the whole time, asked clarifying questions about dates and times. When I finished, he sat back and reviewed his notes. He said the impersonation combined with the coercive texts could support charges of criminal impersonation and harassment, maybe even stalking depending on Jeremiah's history. He asked if I wanted to press charges and I said yes. Wheeler nodded and explained the next steps. He said he could request another wellness check, but this time with police presence. That would let them talk directly to Cheyenne and make sure she was there voluntarily, not being held or coerced. I agreed immediately because I needed to know she was actually safe. Wheeler made a phone call to campus security while I waited. He explained the situation and requested the joint wellness check. Whoever he was talking to must have agreed because he thanked them and hung up. Then he turned back to me and said, while we waited for that to be scheduled, I needed to write out a detailed statement. He handed me several blank forms and a pen. told me to include everything about my relationship with Cheyenne. When I first noticed Jeremiah's behavior, everything that happened last night, be as specific as possible with times and locations. I started writing and quickly realized this was going to take a while. I wrote about how Cheyenne and I started dating 4 months ago, how she'd mentioned her ex a few times but never seemed worried about him, how I'd never seen her take any medication or heard her talk about health issues. Then I wrote about yesterday, the exact time she came to my room, what she said about the missing pills, the photo Carla sent, Jeremiah's Instagram account and the changes to his appearance, the email demanding she meet him alone, her leaving around 10 p.m., the conflicting texts at midnight, my attempts to find her, the 2 a.m. Instagram story, the voice memo revealing blackmail. Writing it all down took over an hour, my hand cramped from holding the pen so long, but I made sure every detail was accurate and complete. When I finished, Wheeler read through my statement carefully. He asked a few follow-up questions and had me clarify some points. Then he signed the bottom and had me sign it too. Lucas witnessed both signatures. Wheeler said he'd just gotten approval for the wellness check. He was going to personally go to Jeremiah's apartment with Tamara Paget from campus security within the next 2 hours. He told me to stay on campus and wait for his call. Under no circumstances should I go there myself, even though I wanted to. He said interfering could complicate the legal case and potentially put Cheyenne in more danger. I promised I'd stay put. Wheeler walked us back to the lobby and said he'd be in touch soon. Lucas and I left the station and headed back toward the dorms. I checked my phone and saw it was already past noon. I told Lucas I was going to the library to try to work on my economics paper. He said that was probably a good idea to keep my mind busy. We split up and I walked to the main library, found an empty study room on the 3rd floor and set up my laptop. Opened my economics paper but couldn't focus on any of the words, just kept checking my phone every 30 seconds. Mike texted me asking how the police report went. I sent him a quick update saying Wheeler was doing a wellness check soon. Mike replied that he was back in our room monitoring Jeremiah's social media, said he'd let me know if anything new got posted. I tried reading my economics textbook, but the words just blurred together. Kept thinking about Cheyenne stuck in that apartment, about what Jeremiah might be saying to her, about what he was threatening to reveal. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. He was checking in to see how I was doing. Asked if I knew about the campus counseling services that had walk-in hours. Said maybe I should talk to someone about everything that was happening. I thanked him but said I just needed to get through the next few hours first. Then I realized I hadn't eaten anything since yesterday afternoon. My stomach felt empty but also twisted up with anxiety. The idea of food made me feel sick. I bought a granola bar from the vending machine downstairs but could only eat half of it. Went back to my study room and stared at my phone. Waiting. At 1 p.m., my phone finally rang. Officer Wheeler. I answered immediately and he said he was heading to Jeremiah's apartment right now with Tamara Paget from campus security. They'd make contact and call me as soon as they had information. He was bringing documentation about no contact orders in case Cheyenne wanted to file one. I thanked him and he said to hang tight. The call ended and I sat there holding my phone. 30 minutes felt like it was going to be the longest wait of my life. I walked around the main floor of the library trying to look busy, but my eyes kept going back to my phone every few seconds. A student working at the circulation desk finally came over and asked if I was okay because I'd been pacing the same section for 10 minutes. I apologized and grabbed my stuff, then headed upstairs to find somewhere more private. The 3rd floor study rooms were mostly empty, so I claimed one in the back corner. The room had a small desk and a whiteboard on the wall, and a window looking out at the parking lot. I set my phone on the desk face up so I wouldn't miss Wheeler's call. Then I started pacing again. Back and forth between the desk and the window. My economics textbook sat unopened in my backpack. There was no way I could focus on supply and demand curves when Cheyenne might be in danger. I checked the time on my phone. Only 5 minutes had passed since Wheeler said he was leaving. I sat down in the chair, but my leg started bouncing up and down on its own. Stood back up and went to the window. Watched cars pull in and out of the parking spaces below. A group of students walked by laughing about something. Everything looked so normal out there while my whole world felt like it was falling apart. My phone buzzed and I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped it. Just a text from Mike asking if I'd heard anything yet. I told him no and he sent back a thumbs up. Went back to pacing. The study room felt too small suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I opened the door and walked down the hallway past other study rooms where people were actually studying like their lives weren't complete chaos. Found a water fountain and took a long drink even though I wasn't thirsty. Just needed something to do with my hands. Checked my phone again. 15 minutes since Wheeler left. I pulled up Cheyenne's Instagram, but she hadn't posted anything. Her last photo was from 3 days ago showing her coffee cup at the campus cafe. Back to the study room. Sat down and tried to do some deep breathing like my mom always told me to do when I got stressed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. It didn't really help. My phone finally rang at exactly 1:45, and Wheeler's name popped up on the screen. I answered before the second ring. Wheeler said he was at Jeremiah's apartment and had made contact. My heart was pounding, so hard I could barely hear him. He explained that Jeremiah answered the door, and at first said Cheyenne wasn't there. Claimed he didn't know what Wheeler was talking about. But then Cheyenne appeared in the hallway behind him. Wheeler said she looked tired and her eyes were red like she'd been crying, but she didn't appear physically hurt. She told Wheeler she was there because she wanted to be, that everything was fine. Wheeler asked if he could speak with her privately, and Cheyenne agreed after a moment. They stepped outside the apartment while Tamara stayed inside with Jeremiah to make sure he didn't interfere. Once they were alone on the exterior stairs, Cheyenne started crying. She admitted to Wheeler that she felt trapped, but was scared of what Jeremiah would do if she tried to leave. He'd been threatening her all night with texts and calls before she even got to his apartment. Said he would tell her parents about the pills and report her to the university for unauthorized drug use. Wheeler asked what pills she was talking about, and Cheyenne finally explained everything. The pills were beta blockers that Jeremiah had been getting for her over the past 6 months. She'd started taking them for performance anxiety during exams and presentations. Her doctor wouldn't prescribe them because she didn't have a heart condition, so Jeremiah offered to get them for her through some connection he had. She knew it was wrong, but she was desperate, and they actually helped. Now Jeremiah was using that against her. He threatened to expose everything if she didn't meet with him. She came to his apartment because she didn't see any other choice. Her scholarship required maintaining a certain GPA, and if the university found out about unauthorized drug use, she could lose everything. Wheeler listened to all of this, and then gave her information about filing a no-contact order. Explained that what Jeremiah was doing qualified as coercion and possibly extortion. He offered to help her leave safely right then and there. Cheyenne agreed and said she wanted to go with him to make a formal statement. Wheeler went back inside and told Tamara the situation. Tamara issued Jeremiah a trespass warning on the spot. Read him the official statement that he was banned from all campus property effective immediately. If he was spotted on campus for any reason, he would be arrested for trespassing. Jeremiah tried to argue, but Tamara cut him off and said the warning was not up for debate. Wheeler brought Cheyenne out to his vehicle, and they headed to the campus security office. He told me to meet them there around 3. I thanked him and hung up, then just sat there for a minute, processing everything. The beta blockers explained so much. Why Cheyenne was so desperate, why she wouldn't go to the health center, why Jeremiah had so much power over her. I grabbed my stuff and headed downstairs, texted Mike that Cheyenne was safe and I was meeting her at campus security. He replied that he was glad she was okay. The walk to the security office took about 15 minutes. I kept checking my phone to see if Cheyenne had texted, but there was nothing. Wheeler's car was already parked outside when I got there. I walked into the lobby, and a security guard pointed me toward a conference room down the hall. Wheeler was sitting at a table with Cheyenne and Tamara. Cheyenne looked exhausted. Her hair was messy and she had dark circles under her eyes. She wouldn't look at me when I walked in, just stared down at her hands folded on the table. Wheeler asked me to sit down, and then Cheyenne confirmed everything he'd already told me on the phone. That Jeremiah stole her pills and used them to manipulate her into coming to his apartment. That he'd been threatening her for days. She spoke quietly and kept her eyes down the whole time. Then she explained something I didn't know. She said she was the one who sent the second text warning me it was a trap. Jeremiah had left his phone on the kitchen counter for just a minute when he went to the bathroom. She grabbed it and quickly typed out that message to warn me. But he caught her right after and took both phones away. That's why she couldn't respond to any of my calls or texts. She'd wanted to, but had no way to contact anyone. Wheeler was writing everything down in his notebook. He explained that while beta blockers themselves might not be illegal, the way Jeremiah obtained them and used them as leverage could support harassment and extortion charges. He was going to forward all the information to the county prosecutor. Tamara added that the trespass warning was already in the system and campus security had been notified. If Jeremiah showed up anywhere on campus, they'd arrest him immediately. After about an hour of documentation and statements, Lucas showed up. Wheeler had called him to help arrange temporary housing for Cheyenne. Lucas explained that he'd talked to housing services, and they had a room available in the West Campus dorm. Cheyenne could move there tonight if she wanted. Get away from her current building and the memories of everything that happened. Cheyenne nodded and said yes, she wanted to move. She looked at me for the first time since I'd arrived, and quietly thanked me for calling security. Said she knew it was the right thing even though she'd been too scared to do it herself. Then she said she needed space to figure things out. That she had a lot to deal with and needed time. I told her I understood even though it hurt to hear. Wheeler wrapped up the meeting and said he'd be in touch about next steps with the prosecutor. Lucas walked Cheyenne out to help her start the moving process. I headed back toward my dorm alone. The sun was setting and campus looked peaceful. Hard to believe everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. When I got back to my room, Mike had cleaned up the rest of the mess from last night. All my clothes were folded and put away. My desk was organized. The baseball cards were back in their boxes. He looked up from his laptop when I walked in and asked if I wanted to order pizza. I said yes because I realized I hadn't eaten anything all day. We pulled up the delivery app and ordered a large pepperoni. Mike didn't ask a bunch of questions about what happened. Just let me sit there and decompress. We turned on some random YouTube videos and waited for the food to arrive. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas saying Cheyenne was settled into her new room and seemed okay. I thanked him for everything he'd done. The pizza showed up 30 minutes later, and Mike and I ate it while watching compilation videos of people failing at simple tasks. It felt good to just exist in a normal moment after all the chaos. Around 9 that night, my laptop pinged with a new email notification. I grabbed it from my desk and saw the sender was campus IT department. The subject line said, "Identity verification required for security investigation." I opened it and read through the message twice. They wanted me to come to their office tomorrow afternoon to verify my account activity and answer questions about unauthorized access. Apparently, someone had sent an email to Cheyenne from a campus computer, and they were tracing which account was used. The message included a case number and said to bring my student ID. I showed Mike the email, and he said it made sense they'd want to confirm I wasn't the one who sent that threatening message to Cheyenne. I replied saying I'd be there at 2 tomorrow and saved the email to my investigation folder. The rest of the night, I kept thinking about having to relive everything again for yet another official person. Mike could tell I was stressed because I kept checking my phone every few minutes, even though no one was texting. He suggested I try to get some sleep since tomorrow would probably be another long day of meetings and statements. I agreed and got ready for bed, but ended up lying awake for hours replaying the whole situation in my head. The next morning, Lucas texted asking if I had time to meet with a campus counselor. He said her name was Alicia Donovan, and she specialized in helping students deal with relationship issues and trauma. I wasn't sure I needed counseling, but Lucas said it would be good to talk to someone professional about everything that happened. He'd already contacted her office, and she had an opening at 10 if I wanted it. I figured it couldn't hurt, so I said yes, and Lucas sent me her office location in the Student Services building. I got there 15 minutes early and filled out some basic intake forms in the waiting room. The forms asked about my mental health history and current stress levels and what brought me in today. I wrote a brief summary about the situation with Cheyenne and Jeremiah and handed the clipboard back to the receptionist. Alicia came out right at 10 and introduced herself. She was probably in her 30s with glasses and a friendly smile that seemed genuine. Her office was small but comfortable with 2 chairs facing each other and some plants on the windowsill. Alicia started by explaining that everything we discussed was private unless I was planning to hurt myself or someone else. She asked me to walk through what happened over the past few days. I told her about Cheyenne tearing through my room looking for pills, the photo of someone who looked like me, Jeremiah's manipulation tactics, the threatening email, and finally the wellness check that got Cheyenne away from him. Alicia listened without interrupting and took a few notes on her tablet. When I finished, she said what I was feeling right now was completely normal for this kind of situation. Anger at Jeremiah for manipulating everyone, betrayal that Cheyenne kept secrets and put herself in danger, confusion about what was real and what wasn't, worry about whether she'd be okay going forward. She said all those emotions made sense and I shouldn't feel guilty for having them. That actually helped because I'd been wondering if I was being selfish for feeling mad at Cheyenne when she was clearly the victim here. Then Alicia started teaching me about healthy boundaries in relationships. She explained that I wasn't responsible for fixing Cheyenne's problems or protecting her from the consequences of her choices. That caring about someone didn't mean taking on their issues as my own. She gave me specific examples of what healthy boundaries looked like. Saying no when someone asks me to do something that makes me uncomfortable. Not dropping everything to solve someone else's crisis. Recognizing when I need space to process my own feelings. She also taught me some scripts for what to say if Jeremiah tried to contact me directly. Simple phrases like, "I don't want to talk to you," or "I'm ending this conversation now." She said having those prepared responses would help me stay calm if he showed up or messaged me. We spent almost an hour going through different scenarios and practicing how I'd respond. By the end, I felt way more prepared to handle whatever came next. After the counseling session, I headed to the IT department for my 2 o'clock appointment. The specialist who met with me was a guy probably in his late 20s who introduced himself as the security coordinator. He pulled up some logs on his computer and asked me to verify my student account username. Then he showed me a list of all the computers I'd logged into over the past week. I recognized most of them from my usual study spots in the library and the computer lab in my dorm. He pointed to one entry that showed a guest computer account in the main library had been used to send an email to Cheyenne's address. The timestamp was from yesterday afternoon, around the same time Jeremiah must have sent that threatening message. The specialist explained that guest accounts didn't require student credentials, so anyone could use them. But the library had security cameras that might have caught who was at that computer. He said he was working with campus police to pull the footage. Then he confirmed that my actual student account hadn't been used for anything suspicious. This proved I wasn't the one who sent the email and that Jeremiah had been on campus impersonating a student. The specialist said this information would strengthen the trespass case against him since he'd violated campus access policies. On day 3, Officer Wheeler called my cell around noon. I was in the library trying to catch up on homework but couldn't really focus. He said the investigation was building a strong case for criminal harassment charges against Jeremiah. They had documentation of the threatening email, the coercive texts, Cheyenne's statement about being held against her will, and now proof he'd trespassed on campus. Wheeler was working with the campus conduct office to make sure the trespass warning stayed enforced. He said campus security had been notified with Jeremiah's photo and description. If he showed up anywhere on campus, they'd arrest him immediately. Wheeler also mentioned the county prosecutor was reviewing everything to decide on formal charges. The whole process would take a few weeks, but the evidence was solid. I thanked him for the update and felt relieved that people were taking this seriously. It wasn't just going to disappear because Jeremiah decided to back off. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a long text from Cheyenne. She started by apologizing for everything that happened and for not being honest with me from the beginning. She explained she got involved with the beta blockers because of pressure to perform well in her classes. Her scholarship required maintaining a high-grade average, and she'd been struggling with test anxiety. Jeremiah offered her the pills as a solution when she was desperate sophomore year. He said they'd help her stay calm during exams without the side effects of regular anxiety medication. At first, it seemed like a good option, but then she realized he was using them to control her. Whenever she tried to break up with him, he'd threaten to cut off her supply or tell her parents what she'd been taking. She admitted she should have gone to a real doctor instead of relying on him, should have been honest with me about what was going on instead of letting him manipulate the whole situation. The text ended with her saying she understood if I didn't want to be with her anymore, but she wanted me to know the truth. I read her message 3 times before responding. Part of me wanted to say everything was fine and we'd figure it out together. But I remembered what Alicia taught me about boundaries and not taking on someone else's problems. I typed out a response saying I appreciated the apology and understood she'd been in a difficult situation. But I needed time to process everything, and I thought we should take a break from our relationship while she figured out her stuff. It was one of the hardest texts I'd ever sent. My thumb hovered over the send button for a solid minute before I finally pressed it. Alicia had helped me understand it was necessary, though. Cheyenne needed to focus on getting proper treatment, and I needed space to deal with my own feelings about what happened. Later that evening, Carla texted me thanking me for getting help for Cheyenne. She said she'd been encouraging Cheyenne to see a real doctor about legitimate treatment for her anxiety. Apparently, Cheyenne had an appointment scheduled at the campus health center for next week. Carla also mentioned something that made my stomach turn. 2 other girls from their dorm had come forward with stories about Jeremiah's controlling behavior from previous semesters. He'd apparently pulled similar manipulation tactics with other students before Cheyenne. One girl said he'd offered her pills for studying. Another said he'd stalked her after she broke up with him. Carla was helping them document everything to give to campus conduct. The pattern was clear now. Jeremiah targeted vulnerable students and used substances or threats to maintain control over them. The next morning, Lucas stopped by my room with an update. Campus conduct had opened formal cases against Jeremiah based on multiple reports of harassment and trespassing. The process would take a few weeks to complete, but the evidence was strong enough that he'd likely be banned from campus permanently. Lucas said the conduct board took these situations seriously, especially when there were multiple victims involved. He'd been collecting statements from everyone affected and forwarding them to the appropriate offices. I thanked him for everything he'd done to help. Having an RA who actually cared and knew the proper procedures made a huge difference. Without Lucas, I probably would have just sat in my room panicking instead of getting official help. That afternoon, I finally got a response from my economics professor about the extension request I'd sent days ago. He granted me an extra week to finish the paper. Said the police report Lucas provided was sufficient documentation of the emergency situation. I felt relieved because I'd been seriously worried about failing the class. The paper was worth 30% of my grade, and there was no way I could have finished it on time with everything else happening. Now I had breathing room to actually focus on the assignment, instead of constantly dealing with crisis management. I opened my laptop and looked at the half-finished draft I'd started before this whole mess began. It felt like a lifetime ago, even though it had only been a few days. Mike knocked on my doorframe the next morning and asked if I wanted to grab breakfast. We walked to the dining hall, and he brought up something I hadn't even thought about. He said I should stop wearing that black hoodie for a while since Jeremiah was still out there somewhere, and people kept confusing us. Made sense. I went through my closet that afternoon and pulled out a red jacket I'd gotten for Christmas but never wore. Felt weird changing my whole style because of some creep, but Mike was right about reducing the confusion. Over the next few days, we fell into a new routine. Mike would check in every morning to make sure I was doing okay. We'd study together in the common room instead of our separate desks. He even came with me to the campus coffee shop when I needed to work on assignments. Having someone around who knew the whole situation made everything easier. I didn't have to explain why I kept checking my phone or why I avoided certain parts of campus. Lucas stopped by on Thursday with a flyer for a workshop happening that weekend. Digital safety and healthy relationships. He said the campus counseling center ran it every month and thought it might help me process everything. I wasn't sure at first because workshops sounded boring, but I trusted Lucas. Saturday morning, I showed up at the student center and found about 20 other students in the room. The counselor running it talked about manipulation tactics and warning signs in relationships. She went through examples of controlling behavior and coercion. Every single thing she described reminded me of something Jeremiah had done to Cheyenne. The fake emergency to get her alone. The threats about telling her parents. Using substances to create dependence. I realized I'd missed so many red flags over the past few weeks. Cheyenne's anxiety had gotten worse, but she wouldn't talk about why. She'd been secretive about her schedule and who she was meeting. She'd mentioned Jeremiah texting her but downplayed it as no big deal. All the signs were there, but I'd been too focused on my own stuff to notice. The workshop gave us handouts about healthy boundaries and communication. I took 3 copies because I wanted to go through them later. Monday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I recognized. Officer Wheeler. My stomach tightened as I answered. He said he had an update about Jeremiah. Campus police had arrested him yesterday near the gym. Apparently, he'd violated the trespass warning by showing up on campus property. Wheeler said Jeremiah claimed he was just visiting a friend, but security footage showed him walking around multiple buildings for over an hour. Now he was facing criminal trespassing charges on top of the harassment investigation. Wheeler explained the charges were more serious because Jeremiah had been officially warned to stay away and chose to ignore it. The prosecutor's office was building a case and wanted to know if I'd be willing to testify if it went to trial. I said yes immediately. Later that day, I got a text from Cheyenne. First one since we'd agreed to take space. She said she'd met with a doctor at the campus health center who evaluated her for anxiety. They talked about legitimate treatment options, including therapy, and maybe properly prescribed medication if needed. She wrote that it felt good to finally be honest with a medical professional about what she'd been dealing with. I texted back saying I was glad she was getting real help. Kept it short because I still needed space but wanted her to know I cared about her well-being. The next week, I threw myself into catching up with schoolwork. My economics paper was due in 3 days, and I still had 10 pages to write. I spent every afternoon in the library working through my research and organizing my arguments. The structure and routine helped me feel more in control. Writing about supply and demand curves was boring, but it gave my brain something concrete to focus on besides the chaos of the past 2 weeks. Mike brought me coffee and snacks when I forgot to eat. He'd text me reminders to take breaks and actually leave the library. By Wednesday night, I'd finished the entire paper, 20 pages of economic analysis that I never thought I'd complete. Thursday morning, Lucas texted our floor group chat with news. Campus Conduct had completed their investigation and officially banned Jeremiah from all university property. They'd sent a formal notification to campus security with his photo and instructions to call police immediately if anyone spotted him on campus. The ban was permanent and would follow him even if he tried to enroll at another school in the state system. Lucas said the conduct board took the situation seriously because multiple students had reported similar experiences with Jeremiah. The pattern of behavior was clear enough that they didn't hesitate with the ban. Friday afternoon, Cheyenne texted asking if I could meet her at the campus security office. She said Officer Wheeler was helping her file a formal no-contact order through the county court system. She wanted me there as a witness since I'd been involved in the original incident. I walked over and found Cheyenne sitting in the waiting area looking tired but determined. Wheeler came out and brought us both into his office. He had a stack of forms printed out and walked Cheyenne through each section. The order would prohibit any direct or indirect contact, including social media, texts, emails, or messages through other people. Jeremiah wouldn't be allowed within 500 feet of Cheyenne, her dorm, her classes, or her workplace. If he violated it, he'd face immediate arrest. Cheyenne filled out the forms with Wheeler's guidance. She listed every incident she could remember going back to last semester: the unwanted visits, the threatening messages, the pills he'd stolen and used as leverage. Wheeler documented everything carefully and said he'd submit the paperwork to the courthouse on Monday. The following Tuesday, I met with Grayson Fletcher in his office to discuss my completed economics paper. I'd emailed it Sunday night and wasn't sure what to expect. Fletcher told me to sit down and said he'd read through the whole thing. He was understanding about the situation and said my work showed I'd managed to focus despite dealing with a personal crisis. He respected that I'd pushed through and produced solid analysis, even with everything else happening. He gave me a B+ on the paper, which brought my grade up to a solid B for the class. I left his office feeling relieved. Wednesday morning, Lucas posted a notice on our floor's bulletin board and in the group chat. He was closing the official dorm incident report and wanted everyone to know about proper reporting procedures. The notice explained how to document harassment or coercion and listed all the available resources for students: campus security, counseling services, the conduct office, victim advocacy. Several residents commented thanking Lucas for handling everything professionally. A few people I didn't know well stopped me in the hallway to say they were glad the situation got resolved. That weekend, Mike suggested we visit his family as a way to decompress and get off campus for a bit. His parents lived 2 hours away in a suburb with actual houses and yards. I packed a bag Friday after my last class, and we drove out that evening. Mike's parents were welcoming and didn't ask invasive questions about what had been happening. His mom made dinner and we sat around talking about normal stuff like sports and movies. His dad showed me his woodworking shop in the garage. They had a guest room set up and told me I could visit whenever I needed a break from campus. Saturday, we just hung out watching football and eating too much food. It was exactly what I needed after weeks of stress and crisis management. Sunday afternoon, we drove back to campus and I felt more settled than I had in weeks. Carla texted me Monday morning saying she was meeting with her RA to help Cheyenne work out a room transfer. She wanted to make sure Cheyenne had stable housing for the rest of the semester without constant reminders of everything that happened. They spent most of Monday afternoon filling out housing paperwork and coordinating with the resident's life office. By Tuesday, Carla confirmed they found an opening in a different building where Cheyenne could move in the following week. The new room was in a quieter hall with better security access, and Cheyenne seemed relieved about the fresh start. I checked Jeremiah's Instagram Tuesday night out of curiosity and noticed his account had gone private. No new posts showed up in over a week, and his follower count dropped significantly. The silence actually felt more reassuring than watching him post vague, dramatic content. Mike pointed out that going dark was probably his way of avoiding more attention after getting arrested for trespassing. Wednesday morning, I got a text from Cheyenne saying she started attending regular counseling sessions at the campus center. She joined a support group for students dealing with anxiety and was working with a therapist on legitimate treatment options. Her messages were brief but respectful of the boundaries I set about needing space. She sent occasional updates about her progress, but never pushed for more contact than I was comfortable with. I appreciated that she understood we needed distance while she focused on recovery. Thursday afternoon, Officer Wheeler called and asked me to stop by the station to pick up final documentation. He handed me a thick folder containing his completed police report and a case number I could reference if needed. Wheeler explained the harassment charges against Jeremiah were moving forward through the county prosecutor's office. The evidence we collected was strong enough that the prosecutor felt confident about getting a conviction or plea deal. Wheeler also gave me copies of all the incident reports and witness statements in case I needed them for any reason. 3 weeks after the initial incident, Cheyenne sent me a longer text confirming she filed the no-contact order and the court approved it. She thanked me for getting help when she couldn't ask for it herself. Her message acknowledged that our relationship was over, but she was grateful I cared enough to involve authorities instead of just walking away. Reading her text made me feel like I made the right choice, even though the whole situation was messy and complicated. I scheduled another session with Alicia to talk about how I was managing the aftermath. She seemed pleased that I maintained healthy boundaries and used campus resources instead of trying to handle everything alone. Alicia encouraged me to keep prioritizing my own well-being and reminded me that helping someone doesn't mean sacrificing my own mental health. We discussed warning signs I should watch for in future relationships, and she gave me strategies for recognizing manipulation tactics early. Lucas organized a dorm floor meeting the following week about safety and reporting procedures. He used the situation as a teaching moment, without sharing identifying details about me or Cheyenne. Several residents asked good questions about how to document harassment and when to involve authorities. A few people seemed more aware of available resources after Lucas explained the process. The meeting made me realize how many students don't know about campus security protocols or victim advocacy services until they need them. 2 days later, I got a call from the county prosecutor's office with news about Jeremiah. They said he accepted a plea deal that included probation, mandatory counseling, and a permanent no-contact order. He wouldn't face jail time, but the charges would remain on his record. The prosecutor explained that the plea deal saved everyone from going through a trial while still holding Jeremiah accountable. I felt relieved knowing he had legal consequences, even if they weren't as severe as they could have been. A month after everything started, I finally felt like I was back to my normal routine. Classes filled my days and I hung out with Mike without constant anxiety about checking my phone. I worked on assignments in the library without looking over my shoulder or worrying about dramatic confrontations. Sometimes I still thought about what happened and wondered if I could have handled things differently. But mostly I felt grateful for the lessons I learned about recognizing manipulation tactics and trusting my instincts when something feels wrong. Cheyenne was doing better with legitimate medical support and regular therapy. Jeremiah was legally required to stay away from all of us. I had stronger boundaries and better coping skills for handling future relationship issues. The whole experience taught me that getting help from authorities and campus resources isn't overreacting when someone's safety is at risk. Mike and I talked about it sometimes, and he pointed out that I did the right thing even when it felt uncomfortable. Looking back, I realized how easily the situation could have gone worse if I hadn't involved Lucas and campus police. The system worked the way it was supposed to, and everyone involved took the situation seriously. That knowledge made me feel more confident about navigating college life and future relationships with better awareness of red flags and healthy boundaries. That's today's story wrapped up. I try to make sure there's always something useful hidden in each one, even if it's small. And hopefully this one gave you something to take with you. Subscribe so you'll catch the next bit of insight.